Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, is widely recognized to be one of the most important figures in the history of philosophy. Now, why is Kant important? Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Bahid, and in this video we're going to talk about why Kant is an important philosopher. Kant changed how philosophy was done, and he greatly influenced the philosophers after him. But what is the change that Kant brought about? In order to make that maybe a little bit more comprehensible, let me begin by talking about a more general topic, and that's the relation between thought and being. Now, what is that about? We human beings think. We are thinking beings. And we think many different thoughts. We think, for example, that birds fly or that the moon goes around the earth. Now, many of the things that we think, many of our thoughts, are true thoughts. For example, if we think that snow is white, that's a true thought because snow really is white. But not everything that we think is true. If I think, for example, that I'm right now sitting in a car, that's not a true thought because right now I'm sitting in my room. So we can say that on the one hand, there is our thinking and our thoughts about the world, and on the other hand, there is the world, or what really exists, or what really is the case. And the world seems to have a certain kind of independence from our thought. So we might think that snow is white or not, we might know about that or not, but regardless of that, snow is white. Here, it seems that we can ask two kinds of questions from a philosophical point of view. We can ask either questions about being or the world. We can ask questions about the structure of reality, questions such as, what does really exist? What is the structure of reality? Are there things whose existence is somehow more fundamental, more basic than other things? And are there maybe things that merely appear to exist but that do not really exist? And those questions would be questions about being. We can also ask questions about thought or mind. We can ask questions such as, how do we come to acquire knowledge of the world? What is the structure of the mind? Do we know certain things with absolute certainty? And so on. And those would be questions about the mind. Now, I'm going to divide the history of philosophy before Kant into two periods. And this is going to be a very general story, and naturally I'm going to ignore a lot of detail, but I think it's plausible to tell such a story, at least as outlines. So in the first period, which begins when philosophy first begins and continues up to the modern period, philosophers were primarily interested in questions about being. They wanted to know the basic structure of reality. So here we can think, for example, of Plato's theory of forms. According to this theory, or at least according to some version of it, there are things that exist in nature, and then there are also pure forms that do not exist in nature, and things that exist in nature are somehow imitations of those pure forms. For example, there's the pure form of the circle, and then there are things in nature that are circular, but none of the things that exist in nature are perfectly circular. It's only the pure form of the circle that's perfectly circular. And everything else that is circular somehow depends on that form and imitates that form in order to be circular. And the pure form of the circle is what truly and really exists as a circle. So we can see that Plato is interested to know about the basic structure of reality, about what kinds of things exist and how they are related to one another, and so on. This concern with questions about being continues up to the modern period, when philosophers begin to shift their attention to questions about thought or the mind. René Descartes and John Locke, for example, can be viewed as pioneers of this way of doing philosophy. They began to examine the mind, to examine the way in which we acquire knowledge of the world, and the basic ideas that the mind contains, and so on. So, for example, John Locke gives us an account of how we acquire simple ideas through experience, and then form these simple ideas into complex ideas. For example, we get the simple ideas of redness and roundness and sweetness through experience, and then combine these simple ideas into the complex idea of an apple. Now, how does Kant view those two philosophical approaches, that is, asking questions about being or asking questions about the mind? For Kant, we cannot treat being and mind as two radically distinct things. We cannot, let's begin with being, we cannot treat being as if it were something completely separate from mind and consciousness. That sort of being would be an unknowable being, an unknowable world. The world that we can ask and answer questions about, the world that we can know about, can always and only be the world that we can be conscious of, the world as we can be conscious of in our experience. So the world for Kant is always the world of our experience, the world as we can be conscious of in our experience. And on the other hand, we cannot treat the mind as if it were something completely separate from the world, something isolated and closed in on itself, having access only to its own ideas, to its own sensations and thoughts. The mind for Kant is rather a capacity to know an objective world, to know the world of experience, the objective world of experience that can be experienced by everyone. That is the mind, a capacity to know an objective world. So we can see that for Kant, mind and world come to be conceived as somehow intimately related. And Kant's idea changed how philosophers after him did philosophy. Now, I know that if you're new to Kant or new to philosophy, this video might have sounded a little bit puzzling, and if that's so, it's just natural because what I said is just an introduction in very general terms. But I will continue posting videos on Kant's thought, and if you're interested to know more about Kant, you can follow and watch my next videos. And finally, if you enjoyed watching this video, please share it with people who you think might be interested in watching it. Thank you and take care.